Hello, everyone. Today I'll be tackling the topic of how to approach actor debates. Actor debates are a relatively new feature in debate formats, and as with any new rule or change that is added to the sport, it's natural to face challenges from both the motion setting side and the debater side. So, a lot of what I'll be tackling in this particular video is still being figured out by everyone, and I just hope to provide some of the basic foundations and common strategies that are employed to effectively approach an actor debate topic. So, what is an actor debate motion? This An actor debate is written in the form of this house as A would do X. A can be any actor or stakeholder, and X is the action that A is being asked to do. Debaters are expected to debate the motion from the perspective of the said actor, and along with this, must argue that the action is in the interest of that actor. So there are a few things I want to point out in this video. Again, these are all part of a guide that I hope people could use rather than being prescriptive and something that people should do or always should do in every single debate, because every debate is always different. First, the interest of the actor is itself subject to debate. All actors in all shapes and forms are complex. Being self interested can mean many things. So it's important to be very specific on what this actor prioritizes. And what I mean by this is that they can consider the interests of other stakeholders so long as it is proven to be important to that actor, as this is part of any or all of the biases, priorities, expectations, or obligations that they may have, appear to have, or be argued to have. An example would be in the motion, this house, as a parent from a disadvantaged community living in a predominantly majority neighborhood, would homeschool their child. Now, in this motion, it's very evident that the parent may have an interest in their child succeeding in school, whether it is be in the environment of homeschooling or be in the environment of a private school with other majority individuals. And thus, it's important to explain where this pride comes from, if it comes from a self interest, or if it comes from a genuine love and care for this child. Both may be true at the same time, and thus it's important for debaters to parse through this in their arguments. This reminder, by the way, is also important for actors that are not necessarily a single individual. Though I'll have more to say this on in a while, but for now, consider the motion this House, as the Democratic Party of the United States, would advocate for universal health care. Now here, the actor is not a parent anymore or a single individual, it's the Democratic Party. And when we deal with groups as an actor, again, it's important to parse through what the identity of that actor is, what their interests are, what they agree or disagree on, what their decision making structure is, and what their past behavior indicates to be their goals. This isn't so much different from how we argue the principles and obligations of what states and governments have in other types of motions. And thus, an actor debate motion only nuances and approximates what interest we should be zoning in on. The second reminder I think is important is to assume reasonable capacity and to prove effectiveness to the extent of relevance. And an important note must be made here immediately. ADGE course should seriously put this into consideration because any actor debate motion depends heavily on the power and limits of that actor's specific actions. The main difference with the way the term fiat is conceptualized in an actor debate motion versus other motions is that we must make motions in which we can reasonably assume that the actor is capable of enacting this action. For example, if the motion were this house as a self identified progressive feminist would boycott makeup, of course, we cannot reasonably expect that this one single self identified progressive feminist is going to change the entirety of the industry of makeup as it is. But what we can say is that it is possible that this individual would be able to stop using makeup individually and may arguably have influence towards their own peers and other individuals that they are close with that may also be progressive feminists. And thus, arguments revolve around this sphere of influence and the arguable extent to which this is possible. Now, while the actor is assumed to be capable of doing a certain action, it is not necessarily the case that it will be effective, or specifically, that it will fulfill the interest of the actor in the way that they may have perceived. So again, in the makeup motion, it is possible to argue that you can encourage other individuals to do so, but it is not guaranteed automatically that this will be effective or it will have a rippling effect. On the other hand, if, for say, we were to change the actor to be a popular social media influencer, then perhaps you might argue it will be effective on a social media reach way, but not necessarily on the messaging for the feminist movement sort of way. So these intricacies must be kept in mind while we are operating or even setting these motions. The last thing I want to say on this particular segment is that the subtle but important difference between a this house as A would do X motion, an actor debate motion, versus another version of a value judgment motion, which is this house believes that it is in the interest of A to do X, is that the former is more intimate and approximate, which means there's a lot more uncertainty and subjectivity that we operate with. And what I mean by this is that the latter motion, this house believes that it is in the interest of A to do X. It includes an evaluation of the outcomes and circumstances to be mentioned or to the mentioned stakeholder, such as if we were to say, this house believes that it is in the interest of the feminist movement to campaign for abortion, or it is in the interest of the feminist movement for abortion to be abolished, we can argue the extent of the interests of how these actions or circumstances affect these actors and whether that is in their interest or not. On the other hand, this also means that in an actor debate motion, we operate reasonably within the knowledge of that actor. So while we can be assured that the actor will enact on this motion, we can't assume that they will be able to stomach some of the harms that come from participating in this motion. And that's what makes these actor debate motions more unique. You operate along with the uncertainty, subjectivity, the knowledge, the capacity, and the effects that come along with enacting this as an individual or as a group individual. Like, for example, a millennial choosing to change their career paths. You could say they would change their career path, the actor is going to enact on this, but it is not guaranteed that they will sustainably stay in that career path or that they will be able to stomach all the harms that come along with attempting to change their career path. Hence, one note I want to make here is that my recommendation to AdCourse is, as much as possible, you could use actor debate motions for individual actors and use this house believes that it is in the interest for group debates on balance, since you are coalescing these interests more from a distance perspective in the latter. But then again, this is constantly changing and debates will come in many of these forms. And so these reminders are very important. The last point I want to make in this video is that it is important to evaluate the effects to the self in relation to debated outcomes and debated interests simultaneously, or whatever is contested. What I mean by this is that currently, there's this ambiguity with many actor debate motions in which some would use the analogy of the angel and the devil arguing on the shoulders of the actor before they make a decision. Now, while I think this is a nice, simple analogy to understand, this might bring about a misunderstanding that it is no longer necessary to consider the internal struggles and complex trade-offs that the actor is made to make through the motion. Moreover, this analogy assumes that the debaters can claim meaningful impacts from just the consideration of the debate, when this, in my opinion, is very lazy. It's not a meaningful argument to say that the actor considering the pros and cons of a motion already brings about harms to the actor, because this argument is not exclusive and neither is it realistic. It's unnecessary meta-thinking, in my opinion. Rather, what I would say is possible is to say that the actor may suffer as a consequence of enacting on the motion, such as the backlash they may experience, the mental toll it may take to undertake this, or even in some circumstances, the fact that their preferences may possibly change in the future. And without going into the philosophical implications of this, what I would say is that this is part of what is contested on in debates as well from the perspective of that actor. While some people may think of this as a silver bullet argument, it's fairly easy to say that people's priorities are not as watery as people may claim it to be. So take for example, and this is the last example I'll be giving in this video, if the motion were this house as the leader of a social movement would run for office. Of course, it is a valid argument to say that politics may corrupt an individual and change you for the worse. And of course, it's valid to say that the actor cares about this. But this argument isn't valuable in the sense that the actor is worried so much and will never be able to enact on a meaningful campaign at all for office, because there are other reasons to prove this to be the case. But rather, this argument is only valuable insofar as it is proven that the actor will suffer through the actions they are made to do while running for office, which causes the harm to character that the actor is worried about. So I hope these clarifications are helpful. Actor debate motions are complicated and they involve a lot of nuance that other motions do not necessarily ask you to do. And that's what I think is great about actor debate motions. And I hope to see a lot more of them in the future. So yes, this is the guide for that. Thank you everyone and have a wonderful day.